MAGA style viewers of politics. It's objectification. It's undermining the veracity of the reporting of a female reporter. It's just not something that is appropriate. It's false. And it's false in like this incredibly weird, gross, parasocial way. Like there was an angle here that he could take that still maintained like some semblance of a pro-Israel position as a progressive pundit. Then he would do it. It's just he's choosing to keep quiet because he doesn't want to say something that would reflect poorly on him and his comment. Sclerotically incapable of existing in a media environment it cannot control. I got it. Sclerotically. That is crazy. Reading comprehension at all-time lows. Yeah, no, that's English is my second language. Some of these words are insane to pronounce, okay? Shut the fuck up. Do you want to know how that would be pronounced? Do you want to know how that would be pronounced in Turkish? Hold on. God damn it. We need a paywall zapper here real quick. Someone send me the paywall remover, please. Okay. Do you want to know how a Turkish, in Turkish, how you would read this? Sicelle ro tijalli. Sicelle ro tijalli. Not even E. Y is silent. There's no Y that's like not silent in Turkish. Okay. Turks in the chat are saying if you read this, you'd have a stroke. If a Turkish person read this word, they'd have a stroke. All right. Do we have a paywall removed link? Can you guys send me a paywall removed link? Tina Wynn wrote as a senior reporter for The Verge, wrote this article about the chorus and updates on the chorus, specifically the story that has evolved away from chorus getting funded from the 1630 fund, all the way down to the way that some of the chorus content creators have like responded. Recently, Wired published an article revealing the existence of a secret Democrat influencer incubator that trained liberal and progressive content creators to push coordinated messaging across their shared social media platforms and paid them handsomely to do so. The fallout has been chaotic, at least in the left-wing influencer world. Creators are shanking their rivals for participating in the program, and paid influencers are trying to defend themselves for taking the money. But the controversy around the Chorus Creator Incubator program stems from the fact that it was so secret, participants had to sign contracts that gave Chorus control over their interview bookings, limit what they said about other creators and non-approved political figures, and were forbidden from even acknowledging that they were part of the program. In response, Chorus, a group funded by 1630 Fund, a liberal 501c4 that's often drawn comparisons to the libertarian Koch network and often outspends them, has stated that it was trying to organize left-wing influencers to match their counterparts in MAGA world. In a statement to The Verge, Chorus founder Brian Tyler Cohen defended the program and said the program has achieved hundreds of new applicants since the Wired story received. I'm incredibly proud that Chorus has received financial support from over 1,000 individuals who recognize that there's a desperate need for more pro-democracy voices in the online space. They want to fund a bunch of diverse creators to do this full-time who wouldn't be able to pay their bills otherwise, and we're incredibly grateful. After the regulator newsletter was sent to subscribers on Tuesday, the 1630 Fund sent a second statement from President Amy Kurtz disputing Wired's claims about the restrictions Chorus placed on creators over guests, content, and disclosing their participation in the program. So what's interesting about this is that they keep saying this is not real, but in every single instance where they've tried to talk about the debunking, where creators that participate in the program have tried to like say that this article is actually false, they openly reveal that there is no dispute in the reporting whatsoever. Dude, you spent half a day on this shit. I know you have a thing for Taylor, but enough. Okay. I think you should see yourself out of this community forever. That's a perma. Also, literally 20 minutes so far into this article. I technically understand, like, the assumption that I am reporting on this because I have a thing for Taylor is so psychotic and gross. We should probably behave better than, like, psychotic MAGA style viewers of politics. It's objectification. It's undermining the veracity of the reporting of a female reporter. It's just not something that is appropriate. It's false. And it's false in like this incredibly weird, gross, parasocial way. Okay. My longtime readers will know this about me, but if you discover me through The Verge, I should probably give you a little context. Last year, I published a memoir called The MAGA Diaries, which goes a bit into how I got ensnared in right-wing activism in my early 20s, specifically how I got lured into the right-wing media career pipeline as a college student seeking journalism internship in 2008, placed by my program mentor in a post-grad job at Tucker Carlson's Daily Caller in 2011, and then was nearly sent to Wisconsin to work at a fake newspaper funded by dark money that wanted to undermine the teachers' union protests. all under the guise of credentialing a journalism fellow to write hit pieces on them. Instead, I quit the journalism network on the spot, yeeted myself out of Washington, and began a magazine writing career in New York, so I'd never have to deal with the conservative movement ever again. Unfortunately, the arc of history had other plans. The Core's influencer program in many ways. By the way, you don't think this is like a interesting article to read? Like you are in here, you're in here right now, which means that you are invested in like political media and how political media is created. I mean, this is a profoundly important aspect of political media, both on the independent side and also on the mainstream side as well. Dark money funding is a major part of political media. And it's not like liberals either. This is not just about liberals. This is like a consistent and pervasive issue in every aspect of your lives. In every type of like political content that you consume, there could potentially be some secretive organizations that are taking advantage of the lack of transparency and funding that are funding some of these fucking movements. And it happens all the time on the right, all the time, with regular frequency. The Chorus Influencer Program, in many ways, is a dem-coded version of the right-wing journalism summer camp that I attended during my sophomore year of college. But let me back it up a bit. I thought I had received a paid summer internship in journalism for liberty-loving students, funded through the Institute of Humane Studies at George Mason University, which promised to get me hired at a non-right-wing place like MSNBC. Seriously, the program advertisement said alumni got placed at MSNBC. The generous internship stipend was contingent on me going to a week-long journalism seminar and assisting in research about the Founding Fathers' views on state-funded education. But looking back on it over a decade later, it was actually a training camp on how to be a proper libertarian thought leader. There were a lot of lectures about liberal media bias, breakout discussion groups on whether Obamacare was an overreach of federal powers, and tips on how to write a resume for when applying for jobs. And of course, no one in my cohort got a job at MSNBC. Dozens of other right-wing journalism talent incubators exist inside the conservative movement, some of which have been around for decades and are constantly learning how to leverage new technology for political gain. I'll give you a great example of this. David Horowitz is a massive piece of shit. Former trot turned into a neocon, turned into a monstrous piece of shit who is a major Islamophobe. He died recently. Rest in peace to David Horowitz. David Horowitz is responsible for Candace Owens, for example. These guys pluck talent early on from the independent media sphere and basically elevate them to prominent mainstream figures. David Horowitz and Ben Shapiro played a formative role in legitimizing and making Candace Owens a major political figure in the American conservative movement. Okay? Think about that. Both of these guys are entirely invested in being as pro-Israel as possible and medic on her rise to power, but she was also pro-Israel until, you know, the tide shift took place. And she became openly anti-Israel while also being anti-Semitic. And that was a bridge too far for Ben Shapiro. And they had a falling out. Now she has still a fairly robust independent media career. But she got her start from these guys, the right-wing version of what we're talking about. The one that is like most pervasive, the one that has always existed. Okay? Over the years, other boot camps and programs have opened up for aspiring social media influencers, live streamers, and the like. I recently learned that the Leadership Institute, a group that's been turning young college Republicans into powerful elected officials since the 1970s, just launched a conservative podcasting school. But ask any right-wing influencer if they've gone to some training camp. Hell, ask them in public. And not only will they quickly say yes, they'll also tell you what program they enrolled in. The reason why we know about David Horowitz, for example, is for this reason. Because these guys are proud of these programs. These guys are proud of them. They're like, yeah, this is our bias. This is our political movement. Not only will they quickly say yes, they'll also tell you what program they enrolled in, who they took classes with, and what they taught of their coursework. They might even be proud of getting into some elite program or getting accepted into a certain seminar. But one can't simply copy the right-wing formula and paste it on the left. The famous Andrew Breitbart saying, politics is downstream from culture, isn't just an observation, but an organizational principle on the right. If you can use culture to change people's values, then you can then get them to vote a certain way. There's a lot to be said about the right's attempts to drive culture forward or backwards, but they were far better at manipulating and taking over where it existed on the internet, or in most cases, ceding control and ridding the wave of the internet entirely, so long as they ended up in power. On the internet, it helps to be shameless. Either way, MAGA influencers have the ability to define what is and is not culture because their followers want to follow a culture warrior, damn it. Why do you think they try to make everything about what is and what is not woke? In contrast, I'm hardly surprised that Coors and the 1630 Fund went to these lengths to restrict what these creators could say. The octogenarians of the Democrat establishment and the rising young leaders who remind said octogenarians of themselves seem sclerotically incapable of existing in a media environment they cannot control. The culture is no longer run by the blue donors in Hollywood and New York. After all, its last president, Joe Biden, had an extremely hostile relationship with reporters and celebrities asking too many questions about his age. And his last presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, was so allergic to appearing on popular podcasts that she would only do so if the host flew to her and conducted the interview on a set completely controlled by the campaign. She reportedly refused to appear on the Joe Rogan Experience if they had to go to the host's Texas studio, and reportedly shelled out 6 figures to build a DC-based Call Her Daddy set for her interview with Alex Cooper, who records her podcast in California. That interview got like what? Not even a fraction of the views that the Joe Rogan Experience got with Donald Trump. There are obviously other issues here as well. Kamala Harris's incapability of coming across as authentic in a long conversation was going to be a major hurdle. Kamala Harris's inability to recognize that people wanted more from her, that they wanted her to represent a change from the Joe Biden administration, and her refusal to recognize that or even say things in line with that was another major hurdle as well. So obviously there were other issues as to why she couldn't do these sorts of podcasts, and why Donald Trump is a uniquely telegenic figure who can do these sorts of podcasts as opposed to people like Kamala Harris. But this was a flaw. Though they've tried to avoid being described as a liberal copycat, the 1630 Fund has been compared to the Koch network, the secretive group right-wing billionaires that created, among other things, this right-wing media training camp that the fund is trying to counter. We reject any notion that the right wing has been more transparent in this area. STF takes great pride in supporting critically important causes, Kurt said in her statement to The Verge. As a Koch alumni via technicality, I think they're pretty dang similar, even if they're somewhat faster to fess up to their involvement. Between 2009 and 2016, the Koch network was unparalleled in funding the rise of the Tea Party. This is true. The Koch brothers created the Tea Party and the Freedom Caucus that came out of that movement. As I've said over and over again, these are like dark money influence in American politics is not just quid pro quo. You go in, you just say, hey, this is the bill that we wrote for you. You better pass this shit and we'll give you money and you'll win your election over year over year. That's not just the only aspect of dark money funding in these operations. There's a pervasive influence peddling operation that exists as well. A lot of you, for the first time ever, started recognizing this for like AIPAC, for example. But AIPAC is the tip of the iceberg for one issue, for Israel. There are a million other groups like this, most of them like ALEC, all these think tanks like Heritage Foundation, American Enterprise Institute, all these places that create subsidiary funds, that create umbrella organizations, that try to shelter who the donors are, the oil lobby in and of itself, the Wilkes brothers, the Koch brothers, like they exist in every aspect of not just like the legislative agenda, but they exist in every aspect of media manipulation as well. Okay? There are people that are going and working at think tanks like the Manhattan Institute. You might know Christopher Rufo, if you recall, Mr. CRT, Mr. Anti-Woke. And they sit around and they try to find new things to get people pissed off about, new fake shit to get people pissed off about. And they get paid handsomely to do this. And then they take these talking points, they create controversy, and they pump these talking points into this network of influencers. Okay? And there is massive horizontal and vertical integration on the right-wing media ecosystem, as I've described over and over again. This is something that I'm very knowledgeable on because this is the industry that I'm in. This is something that I have seen throughout my personal political development, my own personal professional media career. Okay? So, the candidate selection, the digital media apparatus, the voter turnout machine, etc., to the point that the American political right briefly exists as this cadre of wealthy libertarian billionaires envision it. Limited government, open borders, free trade, not too racist. Then Donald Trump found Twitter, got to elect the president twice. The MAGA influences overrode the think tank people and media training camp grads. Even though the Koch network still technically exists, free market libertarianism died in America. Republican voters may not have liked Trump back then, but they preferred his brand over a bunch of old billionaires trying to redefine what Republican meant. And now those billionaires are getting absolutely reamed by Trump's tariffs. So yeah, I think it's a very apt comparison. There's influencers and the power of their parasocial relationships with The Verge, which is the massive other half of the story. And we go more into that below the fold. But before that, here's some of The Verge's latest stories about the regulator world. All right, skipping that. I can rant about the Democrats until the cows come home, but ultimately the point of course was to mobilize these influencers' followers. And that is a very, very new form of what a poli-sci major might call community outreach. After angrily sending Slack messages to each other about it for a full Friday afternoon, we realized that we should probably enjoy our Labor Day weekend and then have a more fulsome, less rage-driven conversation about whether internet communities care about political SpawnCon. The rest is just like back and forth about whether the liberal audiences give a shit about SpawnCon, especially political SpawnCon, sponsored content or not, it seems. There are a bunch of different industries that are colliding here. The influencer industry, the media, journalism specifically, and politics. And each of those industries has its own set of norms and practices and expectations. Many of the influencers at the center of the saga have built platforms by blurring these lines. Are they reporters regurgitating news and offering analysis? Are they content creators who happen to talk about politics and policy? Or are they messages for a political party, an extension of the Democratic Party messaging and voter activation? What's unique about this and what is stoking some of the discontent and disagreement is that a lot of people don't see the issue with these creators taking money from politically aligned groups. I do. That's my own personal flaw, I guess, but I do. I don't think it's appropriate to get money from political advocacy organizations in general. But if you are getting money from a political advocacy organization that you are aligned with politically, you should openly state it. Okay? That's it. And I have said this time and time again. I said this when we were talking about the Tenet stuff with Tim Pool. I've said this before over and over again. I've had opportunities where political advocacy groups have tried to give me money to do interviews and stuff, and I've refused to take money from them. I've been transparent about that as well, and have said no, because I'm the one who fucking funds these organizations, not the other way around. The interview that I conducted with the immigrant rights advocacy group is a great example of this. Okay? It's because in the simplest terms, if you are a political content creator, your output is your product. Okay? That's your whole product. Like, it just doesn't make any sense that you would dilute that with outside influence. It doesn't make any sense. Does that make sense? Like, it makes no sense whatsoever to be like, yeah, I'm just gonna fucking get money from an organization that is going to play a role in my advocacy. They see it like partnering with the liberal brand to advance liberal causes. The right does this, so we should too, is the thinking. I'm sympathetic to this argument, honestly. But the actions of the creators in the group that has been brokering these dark money payments makes no sense if there's really nothing to hide. If this is something that Dems need to do to keep up with the current state of politics, why not publicly say they're doing it to fight Trumpism? This is my point. This is exactly how I feel about this. If they were to come out and be like, yo, my B, it is strange that we had these like contractual obligations. We're fixing that. Okay. And this is a beautiful thing. This is this is out in the open. This is a cool thing that we're doing to combat the Republican Party. Then great. Sure. Okay. I still don't think it's the best thing to do, which is to get money for, if you're a political commentator or an influencer, to get money to say political shit. But if the contract was either less restrictive or they refused to do the red lines that some of these influencers obviously took issue with in terms of editorial control, then there wouldn't be something that is like as newsworthy. Right? But instead of doing that, these guys just went along with it and said, no, actually, Trump is doing this, so we got to do it as well. Fine. Okay. Don't disagree with that. And also, the journalist who's doing this is actually secretly MAGA and a litany of other different things, like saying that the article is debunked without actually debunking anything. Like an article that has 0 retractions in it, by the way, confusing what a retraction is with an update when you actually finally get a quote from the organization. Like these kinds of things are the exact same type of intellectual dishonesty that you expect from the right. This is not something that I want to see on the left. This is not something that I want to see from liberals either. Okay? When I say fight fire with fire or liberals have to become more like Republicans, I don't mean like literally become a bunch of different like blue Charlie Kirks or a liberal PragerU network. I mean like they need to be more aggressive, bold, and refuse to compromise on some of these like stances they take on the humanity of migrants, for example. No Republican ever goes, let's get bipartisanship going. They don't do that. Okay? They don't do that at all. They say, fuck off, every immigrant's a rapist, and we have to fucking jail all of them and deport all of them. Why can't progressive people, liberal and leftist alike, say the exact same shit, but in the direction of the truth, where, you say, no, they're not actually rapists. They're our fucking neighbors. They should just get the proper documentation because they've been living here and working as a part of this economy and are important parts of these neighborhoods and these communities for decades now, and they are just as American as you are. Give them the fucking paperwork. Push for amnesty. That's what the messaging platform is supposed to look like. It almost feels like people are less upset about these undisclosed partnerships than they are about like undisclosed makeup of a text con or something. People being the progressive influencer community or their followers. Though the funny thing is, the moment I asked that, I immediately thought about the double standard in the MAGA influencer community and their following. It's pretty much a given that MAGA influencers are the product of donor grants, training camps, academic programs, etc. And not only do their followers accept that, they find it absolutely necessary for the promotion of their cause, mainly because they think all the general cultural institutions that shape politics like the mainstream media are captured by the libs. So any sort of organizational advantage that the right can throw together, no matter how it's funded, gives them an advantage in the culture wars. People being the followers. And yeah, I think there's actually a demand from liberals that the Democrats figure out their own version of this, which is why it's sort of bizarre to me that this program was hush-hush, that they didn't want creators to talk about specifics of it. A lot of followers don't care and are actually happy that their fave liberal influencers are getting paid. So it looks to me like Chorus in 1630 took a bit too much inspiration for the early... Dude, this is identical to my commentary, by the way. I said this exact same thing. When I saw this, when I saw the contract and the contractual obligations and like the way that it's designed, if you recall, I said immediately, I was like, this looks almost like a carbon copy of like a Koch-funded media network. Like they almost looked at like the Koch method and just slapped it on, but with like a liberal patina. And it does come across in the exact same way. Yeah, woke. You had Koch, now you have woke. Which was notoriously secretive and really, really did not like people tracking exactly where its money went. Media, ground game, etc. The New Yorker's Jane Meyer. Jane Meyer is the journalist for this, by the way. Dark money funding and dark money networks. Jane Meyer from the New Yorker once reported that they would run white noise machines during their closed-door meetings to prevent people from listening. There's an entire freaking chapter in my memoir where I learned that a bunch of the postgrad journalism jobs I applied for were connected in some bizarre secret way to Koch-funded entities. The Koch network was effective, but only what it was designed for, which was to pump money into the Tea Party to make it appear as if it were actually grassroots libertarian organization. This is why I always say the Tea Party movement was not a grassroots movement. It was an Astroturf movement. It was more complex than just like simply paying people to go and stand outside of a protest with placards or whatever. There was an organic initiative to get people out. And that organic initiative actually worked. That organic initiative unironically led to Donald Trump, by the way. The Tea Party culture warriors unironically led to, one, Sarah Palin, which was disastrous and played a formative role in the John McCain ticket falling apart. And then it led to Donald Trump. These guys thought they could just keep pumping their base, some of the most reactionary elements of their base, with like insane radical propositions, and they thought it would not turn into a major problem down the line for themselves, which it did. The Koch network was completely incapable of stopping Trump in 2016, and every time it tried to stand up against Trumpism or reinsert small government back into the GOP's core party values or whatever, it just didn't. This is what liberals are afraid of, for the record. This is the reason why I think if they were to do a Koch-style woke media influencing operation, they would be very careful not to allow any sort of radical elements within the base of the party, radical elements such as a demand for Medicare for all, to actually fly, okay? This is where the editorial control kicks in. This is where the editorial independence becomes an issue, okay? That's it. I truly think that it had to do with the fact that Americans overall were pissed off at the idea of a bunch of rich people trying to hide behind a bunch of ostensibly grassroots organizations, whereas other groups like Turning Point USA would come in with their influencer affiliate program, be pretty open about who they were funded by and what they did, and everyone's like, okay, sure, we're chill with it. To me, it seems like 1630 Fund is still in the part one of the Koch arc, that they have to pretend that their movement is actually grassroots and not something that's turbocharged with donor money. What's interesting is that a lot of the creators do seem to have started from them establishment and want to tap into that, but the execution has been so painfully messy. How much do you think the brand matters here? Like, is it a situation where the audience will accept someone who's like progressive or left-leaning, but then react negatively to anyone that's associated with the official Democratic Party establishment, i.e. anything Biden-Harris coded, gave money to Israel coded? I think there's some of that, but the biggest frustration, where there is any, seems to be about the lack of transparency. I feel like if there was a DSA adjacent group doing this, people would also be mad. So I've covered my share of MAGA influencer civil wars for, 10 years. And on the surface, they're kind of similar. So-and-so is taking money from this guy secretly, but clearly MAGA hasn't suffered from it. This is the first time the Democrats have had actual community internet drama. Tell me if I'm being totally cynical, or are the Dems actually handling this meltdown worse than like any corporation caught in a SpawnCon scandal? I do think the damage control is a little bit clumsy. I think it looks bad to have none of the content creators respond to the Wired pre-publication. So yeah, they didn't say anything. They didn't, because when you write an article like this, you literally go to these people, David Pakman, some of the most like famous Chorus affiliates. You go to them. You go to Chorus itself. You go to 1630 Fund. None of them actually responded at all to the pre-publication questions, only to then launch a faucet, a barrage of like misinformation in some respects under the auspices of like correcting the record. That didn't necessarily like even attack Wired magazine for its publication, but instead directly attacked the journalist. Nothing to see here. Why not say that to the Wire? Why not say that to Wire from the jump? And if the defense is that Chorus doesn't let influencers talk to the media, well, that's weird too. I don't know how long this will live on, though. People only have so much bandwidth to be mad about this. And if there's one thing that's certain about influencer culture, I don't think people are mad about this. I think liberals don't give a shit. I think a lot of liberals, there might be some leftists that are, a little disturbed by this. But overall, by and large, I think a lot of the independent media content creators and their audiences are totally on board with this. They think it's awesome. They think it's great. They see this as a fight. They see this as a real fight that the liberals are finally pushing back, fighting fire with fire. Of course, there is a broader issue that I have with this beyond the transparency, the lack of transparency, or beyond like what kind of messaging seminars are taking place. My issue, of course, would be if the unlimited faucet of mainstream media was utterly incapable of making the Democrats come across more appealing to the masses, why the fuck would an influencer network also do that if the Democrats themselves don't change their policies? This is an issue at the heart of the Democratic Party, okay? That's it. You'll never guess who the DOJ attorney leading the Harvard anti-Semitism case is a big fan of. DOJ lawyer waging war against Harvard sure seems to like Hitler. That's... wow. How unexpected. I feel like in this current media landscape, this is seen as like a benefit for the right, for the record. They're like, oh, he's a real one. He ain't phony. That's how you know he'll really go after the anti-Semites. God forbid a DOJ lawyer has a hobby. I know. That hobby being loving Adolf Hitler. All right, we'll get to that in a second. That's crazy. All right. Okay. I don't know how long this will live on. People only have so much bandwidth. There will always be some new thing that's dividing people. One thing I keep thinking about is how not upset audiences seem to be about the payment element, so much so that I saw a lot of viewers actually say they were glad somebody was paying creators for their work. People are primed to view as like organic content, and this idea of selling out is not really a thing like it was 20 years ago. Payment is almost implied, but it still looks bad when you've been getting money without disclosure. So yeah. Overall, like it is clear to me that the liberal adjacent, like self-described progressive independent media content consumers, even people in my community even have been like, what's the problem? I don't understand. And I've tried to explain what the problem is. The major issue here is that if this is just a rehashing of like, Dem aligned talking points, if this is just like a money faucet being directed at independent content creators, independent seeming content creators, to just rehash the same fucking bullshit Democratic Party positions, it is going to be an abject failure. It will not move the needle at all. If anything, it'll just like make some of the bluer liberals more hardlined on their inability to recognize that like any sort of populist left-wing messaging is actually a good thing. They'll just go, nah, that's not a good thing. My favorite content creator doesn't seem to think so because the Democratic Party doesn't seem to think so. So overall, I think if you are to get money like this, it has to be, I mean, it's better to not get the money at all. I think it's better to like grow your audience overall. And I say this as a person in this space, as a content creator in this space, like, clearly I am a living, breathing example of having uncompromising values and then not getting punished for it, right? There is a market for this. If you want to think about it from a totally cynical, calculated perspective, you can do this organically, okay? You can. But Bro, you have a massive audience? Dog, did I start off with a massive audience? What are you talking about? I came to a fucking video game platform, a gaming website, and started playing Fortnite with friends of mine who were also, progressive, leftist, anti-Zionist Jews talking about Israel and shit, okay? By strapping on a goddamn camera onto my PlayStation 4. And in that process, I had 35 people watching me. This took many, many years. Yes, you had a large audience right out the womb. Exactly. I woke up to having thousands of viewers. Okay? I had 35 people watching, which is still huge. Like, I had a big leg up, for the record. I did, because I worked at TYT beforehand. But, like, if you think that even I expected to be one of the, not just like one of the largest leftist content creators in general, like one of the largest political commentators in general in the country, that was an ambition of mine, certainly. But the notion that I would be one of the largest content creators in general on this platform, that was never the case. Like, that was never a thing that I thought would happen. And it's not a thing that I take for granted. Okay?